U.S. President Trump floating a controversial plan today to deal with the country's opioid crisis. He says some convicted drug dealers, the one he calls the big pushers, should get the death penalty. Civil liberty advocates are calling the proposal absurd, saying the country can't execute its way out of the opioid epidemic. So if this isn't the solution, then what is? And what can Canada learn from American efforts to eradicate this problem? Joining us now is Fred Brayson, the CEO of Project Lazarus, a U.S.-based group that's been tackling the problem in North Carolina. And he's in Ottawa today to take part in a forum on the opioid epidemic in North America. You have heard the president's remarks today. He's talked about the death penalty for some drug dealers. What do you make of that?
Well, the death penalty is obviously far-reaching for corrections and criminalization. If you look at the dealers today, obviously we've got, being flooded from China. The Mexican cartel is, using the border to get into the United States with heroin now because they're growing the poppies down there. They even say sometimes some of it comes through Canada, but with the Chinese and the fentanyl issue, it does. The local dealer is a little different because it used to be back in the day where the dealer did not use, they only sold. Now the person is doing both in order to supply for their own substance use disorder addiction. So how do you balance that when the addiction is causing some of that and looking at it harshly to say, okay, your addiction did this, but you're getting the death penalty.
They're victims somewhat in this equation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now I understand if somebody's bringing a boatload over or a truckload over, that's a different scenario. But if you're trying to track somebody who overdosed, where did all that come from? And how far do you take that to try and find that individual?
The president also spoke today about the origins of the opioid crisis. And a lot of people have traced it back to some of the big pharmaceuticals. This notion that big drug companies ought to be held accountable. Where does that actually meet reality today? Well,
years ago, some were held accountable with huge fines, for the way that they marketed their product. But it kind of was the perfect storm. They were mandated, the practitioners, to eliminate pain. So then the manufacturers had to meet that demand because that was the only paying source in order to get them the care that they needed to be free from pain was to write a prescription. Some people say it caused the problem, or did it identify the problem? Mm-hmm. Identifying the problem means, what social determinants, what aspects do we have going on? High depression rates, high poverty rates, lack of jobs, high unemployment. All of those factors are drivers for substance use, and the opioids treating pain moved into those neighborhoods where there hadn't been anything like that before, where it was alcohol and marijuana. Now there was something else in the mix, a new supply. Are they culpable in some way? Well, obviously some were. They got fined. Are they doing it today the way they did before? No. So is this a little late in the game to be looking at them? Or trying to just get some funds, and penalize them in order to, to pay for some of the actions that the president wants to take.
Per capita, the opioid crisis in the United States is vastly worse than it is in Canada. What are the parts of the president's plan you think that might actually work?
Well, he did talk about, providing naloxone to first responders and so forth, the rescue medication, which is great. I also prefer that's on the back end. Well, let's get it at the prescribing end. When somebody writes a prescription for an opioid and they're on a certain level of that and with a certain danger of the risks of an overdose, write them a prescription for naloxone. So that's good, too. He talked about treatment and corrections, which is excellent because it's not there. If you enter jail today, you lose the treatment maybe that you were in, or if you've been arrested and using, you go through withdrawal and you're never treated for that addiction.
Or you pick up the addiction in jail.
That can happen also. And the highest population for death in the United States is somebody who's recently incarcerated within 2 to 3 weeks because they go to use when they haven't been using, and that raises the risk and unfortunately causes the overdose.
I was amazed at some of the statistics coming out of the United States that soldiers or veterans of wars are in fact very high users of opioids in many cases, and often are those who die as a result. You've done a lot of work in North Carolina where there are a lot of soldiers. What has your group done that's actually made a difference there?
We did a project that's still ongoing called Operation Opioid Safe at Fort Bragg, the Womack Army Medical Center, the largest Army base in the entire world. They serve like 140,000 people when you're talking about soldiers and families and so forth. They were losing soldiers back in 2007 and 2008. They actually contacted us. We helped with the chronic pain initiative that we were doing to develop best practice, within the department and the soldiers that they were serving. co-prescribing naloxone, looking at the alternatives, I call them other modalities for treatment, acupuncture, chiropractic care, the therapies. They've lessened their overdoses dramatically. They've changed the amount of prescriptions that are going out. They use abuse deterrent formulations so they can't be diverted. And they changed the structure of what soldiers can do when they're on medication. It used to be you could be on chronic pain, opioid care, and get deployed. Over in Iraq and Afghanistan, driving a tank, jumping out of airplanes, not anymore. If you're on long-term care because of an injury for a chronic situation, your commander knows about it, your weapon is secured, and you're not have any equipment. So those are all the things that have developed, and now that pretty much has branched out, military-wide, including the Veterans Administration, with good, strong pain care.
That is the military that we're talking about. Just broaden it back out into the larger population for a moment. Different countries have tried different approaches. In Canada, we've tried supervised injection sites. What are things that Canada is doing right, whether it's that or something else?
Well, you moved very swiftly on the naloxone, getting naloxone into the hands of people that are at risk for an overdose, whatever that may be. It could be a patient on significant medication and other comorbid conditions. It could be a family that's on chronic pain medication and they've got toddlers in the house, or somebody who's using. You've done a very good job in many areas of getting it out to the population that needs it. And especially in the rural areas. Your safe injection sites you've been doing for a long time out of Vancouver and other places.
What do you make of them?
Well, at first it was like, really? Just because I didn't have that in my background.
Yeah.
But now it's like when I see the studies and I see the response from the individuals, more people in treatment, no HIV, no Hep C, and no overdoses. We're in an epidemic. We have to meet people in their present need in order to bring them through. And that is one way to show that we care. We're not stigmatizing them. We're not being prejudiced against them. Let's help you in the situation that you're in, and that brings more people into treatment.
Fred Brayson, you're only in Canada for the day, but I appreciate your time.
Yeah, certainly. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.